We're live. All right, how are you guys doing? So this is my lovely wife, great mom, and a health coach extraordinaire. And we wanted to talk to you tonight about, frankly, how your health can save you some money. Now, we can't see your comments as you're posting them, so I'll have to respond later if you make comments and stuff. The thing that we'll ask you on the front end is give us some of those little hearts and those little likes. We appreciate that. But our goal when we go to work every day is to help people improve their lives, and we want to get rid of the lies in healthcare, because a lot of it's a lie. It's when we go to work to help people without drugs and surgery, but without the idea of drugs and surgery, then what we get a lot of comments about is, that's great, but what you do isn't covered by insurance.
It's true. And some of what we do is covered by insurance, but our approach really is to consider that nothing is covered by insurance and really look at what does investing in your health get you in return. So you may go to your primary care doctor and you go, okay, I'm going to go there because it's only going to cost me a copay, $25, $40, whatever it is. And in our mind, we say, I'm going to go there because it's only going to cost me that much. And I can tell you that in truth,
It never costs you that much.
it never costs you that much.
It always costs you more.
It always costs you more.
I mean, unless you have a simple infection or something, maybe
Sure.
you have a UTI, like a one-time thing, and it's an acute care issue.
Sure.
It never costs you that much. So this has been this way. The statistic's been this way for many years now. 2/3 of all personal bankruptcy in the United States are due to medical expenses and medical conditions. 2/3 of all personal bankruptcy due to medical expenses. The Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, they knew this number, and a lot of putting the Affordable Care Act out there was designed to say, well, the reason this is occurring is because people lack health insurance. And it was a great thing to try to get people more health insurance. But I'm going to show you what happened, all right? Not what happened, actually, because the numbers stayed the same. Of those people who declared bankruptcy, over 70% were noted to have health insurance. So whether they had health insurance or not did not keep them from bankruptcy. Factually, it went up a couple of percentage points after Affordable Care Act. So what that meant was, it was not just the medical expenses, but it was many other expenses associated with the health problem that caused them to have financial hardship. So
Right. So when you consider financial bankruptcy and you consider health costs leading to that, what does that mean? So where do those health costs come from that are leading someone into a bankruptcy? So there's a few different things. There's always the crisis, and crises do happen. So you fall off your roof and you end up having emergency surgery, and that is an unexpected thing to have happen. And
that's why I'm not allowed to climb on the roof.
that's why he does not climb on the roof, exactly. But in truth, in looking across the board at where those bankruptcies come from, it's not the crises that are the problem.
I would say not the crises. It's not the emergencies.
Right.
Okay. It's the shall we say, it's not the preventable issues that we're talking about. Most of these bankruptcies occur due to preventable diseases and illnesses. Okay, so most of what you see here is due to preventable diseases and illnesses. And then the bankruptcies occur not just from healthcare costs, but lost wages,
Right.
Time out of work because they're in the hospital. Lots of different factors go into this.
Right.
And most of it is preventable. So the title to this, if you notice the title, it's, should you invest in your health?
Right.
Right. And what we mean by should you be willing to spend money on yourself for your health? And I think the overwhelming answer is 100%. You should, and funny enough, you go look at this and you say, oh, I'm in debt. But the truth of the matter is, you should be willing to go into debt for good health.
Right.
You should be willing to go into debt for good health, because if you do not have good health, you don't have much of anything. It's your best resource is your body and your health. You don't have much of anything, and people tend to spend less on their own bodies than they do on their car, which they trade in every 7 years.
Or their house. I talk to patients all the time about the cost of things, and if you live in Middle Tennessee, which is where we are, and your air conditioner goes out, I mean, in September at this point, since it's been 90 degrees here for some time, you don't hesitate to go into debt to get that fixed, because you don't live in Middle Tennessee without an air conditioner. And air conditioning units, $5,000, $7,000, depending on
$4,000 to $7,000,
depending on what you need. And that is almost a no-brainer. So there are things where we don't hesitate to go into debt on those things. But when it comes to our own body, it's a different thought process. It's quite different.
Yeah, and then people go, well, anyway, it's just the thing that we hear a lot. We heard it from a patient last week, and I think it prompted us to talk about this, is that we heard from a patient last week. She said she would spend money on her dog. And we respect that.
Sure, of course.
Patients,
it's your family.
They're your family. She would spend money on her dog. She would spend money on her husband's health, but she'd never think about spending money on her own health. And that is a problem, of course, because she is not well. She doesn't feel well. And then we have patients on a regular basis who they just will not spend money on themselves. Now, this isn't about us. We have colleagues all over the country that patients say, if it's not covered by insurance, I'm not going to do it. And we understand that to the degree that you spend money on health insurance, you think they should cover it. But health insurance isn't designed to keep you healthy. They're designed to fix, they're designed to manage disease, really. So I wanted to give you a couple of different scenarios here. I'm going to show you one. This is one just regarding costs of some things. Likelihood of surgery, sorry, I have to look at the camera so you can hear me. For workers with back injuries, if their first point of contact was a surgeon, 42.7% were recommended to have surgery. If their first place they went was a medical doctor or a surgeon, the likelihood of them having a surgery was 42.7%. If their first point of contact was a chiropractor, as an example, now I'm not touting chiropractic as a thing just because I'm a chiropractor, but this is a good statistic here. 1.5% led to surgery. So this group here, 1.5% needed surgery, ended up having surgery. In this group, 42.7%. So what are the costs here, right? What if you had to invest your own money into this care plan, right?
Actually, let's even take it from the viewpoint of, let's say that you have insurance for the surgery. Because doesn't that end up being the question? A patient will say, well, I mean, I guess I'll have the surgery because my insurance covers it. And let's say insurance doesn't cover chiropractic care on that particular plan. Now, obviously, many plans cover chiropractic care, but let's say that it was a scenario where they didn't. So the person says, well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and have the surgery because my insurance covers it. Okay, so those of you who have had surgery, you will know this because you have seen the EOBs, you have seen the bills, you have maybe been sent to collections. Maybe you have a personal bankruptcy because this was a scenario that you went through. So you have office visits, co-pays, deductible, co-insurance, and then if you're lucky, that's all you have with a back surgery. You might have some physical therapy and some missed time.
Yeah, you're going to have your co-pays and co-insurance with all of your with all your therapy, provided somebody told you to go do therapy, which they should have.
Right.
And then you're going to have the cost of medications afterwards, your office visits after the surgery, and as you said, the lost work and the lost time, the lost enjoyment with your family, and those costs.
But let's talk about the success of that surgery, because this is important. So, let's say you're this guy, get injured, you go see the surgeon, and they say, well, you're one of those 42.7%, you're going to have a back surgery. In fact, 50% of back surgeries don't work.
Actually, I had a neurosurgeon tell me that in the physician's databases, it's closer to 75% of back surgeries are considered a failure.
So then you have the possibility of more lost time from work, more therapy, a revision of the surgery, a new surgery. Saw a patient just today who had a back surgery Back surgery handled the pain she was having, but she ended up with numbness in her toes and drop foot. So traded in one thing, got another thing. Was the surgery a success? Well, maybe. She doesn't have that back pain anymore, but now she has some new thing that she's been handling from that. So
lots of costs associated with this, as you can see. If you have a $5,000 deductible, which is not unheard of nowadays, so you have a $5,000 deductible, if you got to pay, your out-of-pocket max might be $10,000. So even with all the co-insurances and everything else, the most you would pay out of pocket for the surgery and doctor's office visits would be $10,000. So you're out of pocket $10,000. And then what about your lost work? Because your insurance isn't paying for that unless you have disability or short-term disability. So you have lost work. You have all those lost things. Here you have, as an example, if chiropractic was part of the scenario, you got to turn your shoulder. They can see that.
oh yeah, sorry.
So
Let's
what
see.
if that were the situation? What if you had to pay out of pocket for this, or you had to meet your deductible? So you're out of pocket maybe $5,000 for the whole care plan for this, and 98.5% of them did not result in a surgery. No missed work because, well, maybe 30 minutes to go to the office visit, right? 3 times a week. So you're looking at an hour and a half a week of missed work, and 98.5% did not result in a surgery. So what is the real cost difference? You think that this is going to cost you very little, and in all reality, it costs you $10,000, but it's covered by insurance. This, much safer, just as an example.
Right.
So let's talk about, just for a minute, let's talk about diabetes, right? So diabetes, by all accounts, is the most expensive disease in the United States. The reason it's the most expensive disease is because you can have it for so long with all the comorbidities that go along with it. Did a little research on this today, just make sure my numbers were up to snuff. And most resources say that the average case of diabetes is going to cost between $10,000 and $16,000 a year to manage. Now, obviously, when you're new to having diabetes early on, it's not going to cost you as much as later on when you have the heart disease and the peripheral vascular disease and you have the neuropathy and all those things. But if you average it out, the average case of diabetes is costing around $13,000 a year. And if the average person has it for 30 years, well, just do a little bit of math and you can see. In 2016, and I may be wrong, and this might be 2017, the research showed that the United States spends $327 billion on diabetes for about 30 million Americans, and that number will be 60 million in the very near future. So by far the most expensive disease that we have.
So then let's look at, what do you pay for? So you might say, well, I have a copay at my office visit. I only pay a portion of my medication. And the question then becomes, yeah, but for how many doctor's visits? For how many specialists? For how many procedures? For how much medication? And then how much additional medication because of the side effects of that medication? And then and that goes on
and early
years
on,
and years and years.
Yeah, and early on it doesn't seem like much, but as the time goes on, it really adds up and your quality of life decreases. Versus, all right, so we have this cost, $327 billion. I don't have a calculator on me, but let's say 30 years times 13,000, you could see what a personal one case of diabetes would cost. Let's go over the out-of-pocket expenses if we're actually talking about true healthcare, not disease management.
Yeah.
All right.
And the reason for this is if you have type 2 diabetes, every research that's ever been done on type 2 diabetes shows that it is nearly 100% reversible with diet and lifestyle alone. Nearly 100% reversible. Get that. Really get that. 100% reversible. As in, you could not have it after having it. But what does that take?
And then what about preventing it? So what are the costs? Let's say you're on this side of things. We went over the cost here. We didn't have time to create more slides, but what are the costs? What are the chances of you going into bankruptcy if you were diagnosed with diabetes today and you started to change your diet and lifestyle? What are your costs? The costs are eating a little bit better, eating organically out of the grocery store, or getting better food at the restaurants that you go to. Maybe having bottled water or a tea and not sweet tea instead of some sodas. Maybe not having some alcohol. So in some ways you're going to spend more money on some healthier foods. And what about those supplements? My God forbid you spend money on supplements, right? And then what about office visits for seeing somebody like us? Because some of you are watching this from maybe somewhere around the world or somewhere else in this country other than Tennessee. And there may be other providers that you have to kind of drill down a little bit and do some specialized lab work in order to determine why your body's inflamed and what are the underlying reasons for the diabetes. But what if all that cost you $5,000 or $6,000? We're talking about $5,000 or $6,000 to fix the problem, provided you do your part, versus 327 billion divided by 30 million people, whatever that number is. That's your cost. I think it's somewhere around $327,000 over the course of your lifetime to manage a case of diabetes with standard medicine.
Standard medicine, right.
So the point we wanted to make here is we hear all the time that people they're like, oh, I would never borrow money or I would never spend money on treatment that isn't covered by insurance. And Karen could tell you, and some of you know this already, I get to be a little bit of a hothead and sometimes can have a little bit of a mouth, but I'm going to say it the way I see it on this. That's an asinine idea, right? It's an asinine idea to consider that your health insurance is going to fix your problem. You should consider saying, I'm going to borrow money on a credit card. You should consider selling something. You should consider borrowing money against your house. You should consider many, many things in order to look at your greatest asset and invest in that, because your ability to work, your ability to enjoy your family, your ability to make money, this is how you actually spend money to make money. You invest in things that are going to pay off, and investing in your health is the number one thing you should invest in. So no matter where you are in the country watching this, you should find some physicians, find some healthcare providers that can actually get you better, and invest in them and expect them to invest their time and effort and knowledge back in you to actually get you well, because these guys aren't going to do it for you, all right? And we don't need you being one of the, I can't remember how many it was, numbers of some great number of people that every year are declaring bankruptcy due to medical bills.
That's right. Yeah, you can get control of this and you can get ahead of it. And in truth, spending money on it is going to save money in the long run. And it is a long game. This is a long game. Your health is a long game. And be ready. Be ready to invest in yourself. It's the best way to go.
Yeah, we're not trying to tell you to spend money with us, but you should.
Certainly can.
Certainly can. Pardon me. The point is, invest in yourself. Folks, we thank you for watching. Hit that like button. Hit that share button especially. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thanks, y'all.